Hello, everyone, once again. This is Rob with Media Awareness, and welcome to part 4 of my journey retrospective. If you have not seen the first 3 parts, they will be listed in the description below. You can click on the links for them separately and watch them at your leisure. If you like my content, feel free to click the like button, click the bell icon, and feel free to message me on Facebook. You can find my Facebook link on my YouTube main page. I'd love to know your thoughts. So, at the end of part 3, we had left Journey pretty much in a state of limbo, with Steve Perry taking some well deserved time off. Neil Sean and Jonathan Kane went on to work on some other projects. And I wouldn't normally talk about side projects, um, but in the case of Neil Sean and Jonathan Kane, one of those side projects reunited Kane with ex-band member John Waite from his band The Babies, and they formed the band Bad English, scoring a #1 hit with When I See You Smile. And that was quite a landmark event. In 1990, however, there was another project on the horizon. A project that was Journey in everything but name alone. It was called The Storm. The Storm consisted of a gentleman by the name of Kevin Chalfant on lead vocals, Greg Raleigh on lead vocals and keyboards, Ross Valerie on bass, and Steve Smith on drums, joined by Josh Ramos on guitar. And if you heard the song I've got a lot to learn about love on the radio at that time, as I did, you probably thought to yourself, it's Journey. And I vividly recall listening, and I very, very rarely listen to the radio, but I was on my way up to the Gallery of Sound, the local record store, um, and I heard this song, and I thought, that sounds like classic Journey, but modern sounding. It had a very clean, polished production, almost too clean, but it sounded like Journey, and it even felt like Journey, the whole vibe. So I went into the record store asking for the new Journey album, and the gentleman at the counter said, "Oh, you mean the Storm?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said that they were unable to use the name Journey, so they called themselves the Storm. So I bought the album and I brought it home and I listened to it. And it was only when I looked into the liner notes of the CD that I realized that the person I thought was Steve Perry was not Steve Perry. It was Kevin Chalfant. He sounded so much like Steve on I've Got a Lot to Learn About Love that his vocals opposite Raleigh, you'd swear you were listening to a classic Journey with a modern twist. And that's how it felt. And because the band contained Raleigh and Valerie and Smith, I classify it as a sort of Journey's alter ego, if you will. Coincidentally, in 1991, when the Storm released this debut album, Journey, what was left of Journey, that is, Steve Perry, Neil Sean, and Jonathan Kane, reunited for a one time only uh, benefit for late concert promoter Bill Graham. They performed a few songs together, and it was sort of a heartbreaking moment because the band was just not themselves. It was an acoustic set. It was it was nice to see them reunite, but it didn't really capture the energy that was Journey. The Storm, however, sounded the way Journey was familiar to us as sounding. Just prior to the Storm, Ross Valerie had worked with Chalfont on a project called VU, or it's pronounced the VU. It was also repackaged as Phoenix Rising and under various other titles I've seen it under. And it was a project that really brought Chalfont into a commercial vein. The album itself sounds like Journey, but it's not. It's Prairie Prince on drums, who once played with Journey prior to Ainsley Dunbar joining, Ross Valerie, of course, and Kevin on lead. But the Storm really felt more like Journey. You had Greg Raleigh back, and the album was great. And they toured, and the tour was successful, and they ended up headlining some shows, as opposed to being simply an opening act. And they were going over tremendously well. They recorded the second album called Eye of the Storm, submitted it to Interscope Records, their record label, and it was turned down as the record label was focusing on rap music at that point in time. So, with Eye of the Storm indefinitely shelved, Chalfont was invited to take part in a Journey reunion of sorts, a roast for manager Herbie Herbert. This lineup of Journey consisted of Chalfont on lead vocals, Greg Raleigh on lead vocals and keyboards, Jonathan Cain on keyboards, Neil Sean on guitar, Steve Smith on drums, and Ross Valerie on bass. It was a Journey supergroup. They also had Ainsley Dunbar join them on stage as well. And it went over so well that Chalfont was invited to join Journey formally. They started working together as the supergroup that they were at that point, with Raleigh back in the band alongside Kane and Sean, Valerie, and Smith. And sadly, this was never to be. Although they started writing material around that same time, Steve Perry, who had released his second solo album For the Love of Strange Medicine and just completed his solo tour, had contacted Jonathan Cain and Neil Sean about reuniting the 80s lineup of Journey, the early 80s lineup, I should say, consisting of Perry, Sean, Cain, Valerie, and Smith. Chalfont was let go, and so was Raleigh. And the project that ensued was Journey's Trial by Fire. a new Journey album for a new decade. However, it really was Journey. It was as much Journey, in my opinion, as The Storm was. Around that same time, Eye of the Storm was also issued finally on CD. But by that point, uh, everyone had moved on, evidently, and um, the storm was no more. Journey, though, was, and a tour was planned. However, Steve Perry, when attempting to get in shape for the tour, had undergone some serious injuries in Hawaii. He didn't want to rush into making a decision about surgery right away. The album was already out at that point, and they had a hit single with When You Love a Woman. Without a tour to support Trial by Fire, the album faded into the catalog, and the band released a greatest hits live, um, which was a good album, but it was not great. It was not a new Journey tour. It was old Journey material repackaged, repurposed, and in some cases unreleased live material for this particular live release. And that was the 1990s for Journey. So I hope you enjoyed this segment of my Journey retrospective. I hope that you will check out the albums The Storm and The Eye of the Storm. They're both available on CD still, if you're lucky enough to find them. And they are both available on Spotify to stream as well. Kevin Chalfant did not entirely give up on Journey. He did do his own collection of Journey songs that he really loved and loved singing and loved in general. The album is called Fly to Freedom. Chalfant chose the name as a means of paying homage to the never recorded, by that point in time at least, Freedom album, which was the original title for 1986's Raised on Radio, which is the title for the new Journey album. It all connects. If you do want to hear what Journey would have sounded like with Chalfant on lead vocals, I urge you to seek out Fly to Freedom. The artwork says it all. It's Journey, in my opinion. Um, Journey inspired, at least. So, I hope you enjoyed part 4 of my Journey retrospective. Stay tuned for part 5, which will be out soon. And once again, this is Rob with Media Awareness. And if this video was helpful, once again, not to be redundant, but click the bell icon, click the like button, leave a comment. Feel free to check me out on Facebook, on Patreon, wherever you like. And I will see you next time. Have a good night.